I want to start today by telling the story of Mohammed, a newborn baby in northern Gaza. Just a few hours after Mohammed was born, he and his mother Ragad had to be transferred to a new hospital amid fears for their safety. On the way, their ambulance was hit by an Israeli missile. The paramedics survived and tried to save the mother and baby, but they were hit by a second missile. 20 hours later, Mohammed was found the only survivor. Sky News reported he was cradled in his dead mother's arms. Sadly, Mohammed's story is not a one-off. On November 8, the UN Human Rights Office published its report into the verifiable deaths in Gaza, deaths with which there are 3 independent sources to corroborate them. The UN found that close to 70% of the fatalities were of children and women. Yeah, give way.
No worries. Thank you, Sir Roger. Just on the honourable member's point, will he agree with me that the toll of the impact on children has been absolutely devastating, with over 16,000 children killed in Gaza, but also in the West Bank? We have seen that it's been the deadliest year in terms of children being killed, over 171, and that's the greatest number of children dying at any time since the Israeli army seized control of the area in 1967. So does he agree with me that the government must do more in terms of meeting our aims on international humanitarian law?
Friend is absolutely right. And to back up her point, in residential housing, where the vast majority of people die in Gaza, 44% of deaths are of children, 26% are of women. I'll say that again, 44% of the deaths are of children. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said on November the 8th, "This unprecedented level of killing and injury of civilians is a direct consequence of the failure to comply with fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, namely the principles of distinction, proportionality and precautions in attack." So these deaths of children are not one-offs. They're not exceptions that prove the rule of Israeli safeguards in the theatre of conflict. The frequent, relentless loss of civilian life proves that rule of law, international law, is being willfully ignored. And the repeated restrictions on humanitarian aid to Gaza are a further breach of basic fundamental international legal obligations on an occupying power. And let's not forget, this is an occupying power. Despite the US's ultimatum prompting some opening of crossings recently, there's still a trickle of aid going into Gaza, and winter is coming. The UN and the UK rightly condemned Hamas's rampage of killing, barbarism and hostage-taking on October the 7th, 2023. The very act of taking and keeping hostages is itself a war crime, and the anguish their families face must be unbearable. Nothing can ever justify or excuse the horror of October 7. But nothing can ever justify or excuse the massive loss of civilian life that has followed day in, day out ever since. So can I ask the Minister if she believes the UK is at present fulfilling its own obligations under international law as affects our trade and arms links with Israel, not just in Gaza but in the illegal settlements in the West Bank? And given that ultimately the only route to peace for both Israelis and Palestinians is a negotiated settlement, can I ask what progress the UK has made in working with other countries to recognise the state of Palestine as soon as possible?